It's good to be here today. I was telling people at my table I've never been to a table talk because they've traditionally been on Thursdays, and I have taught on Thursdays for 15 years, each semester, and so I just don't even look at it and get interested because I don't think I can attend, and so it's good to be here just with you in this context. And just a disclaimer, right before I started, I had that really pretty green background for PowerPoint. It was so ugly that I changed it real quick. So it might have thrown some of my formatting off, so please, if it did, sorry about that. What I would like to do today, let me frame it for you, is it's a big topic, obviously. The origins, the etiology on origins, and we won't do it justice, I'm sure you are aware of that. But what I'd like to do is I would like to present for you areas of research that have been going on and where they stand now, kind of what's happening in that area, and give you a little bit of context. So most of my talk is going to be in doing that. And then I will also talk with you at the end, if we have time, you have questions about my involvement in the gay community, which has really been with some personal relationships, but also as a member of the Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, Transgender Committee in a national organization of psychology. So it's something I attend twice a year, and I've known people for, I've been going to that probably 17 years. So have a lot of long-standing relationships and bridging that, being evangelical and then going into a very secular group. I'm not the only one. We have others that have been in the gap. Clark Campbell was president of that organization. Clark, I think you were the first Christian? Yeah, first Christian ever elected president of the organization. That's a big deal. And what it comes down to, I think, with with Clark's involvement, but also my own involvement with the committees over this particular committee that I mentioned over the years, is relationship. It always comes down to relationship. And I love how Rick started out. That was a beautiful introduction to this topic. So, and it certainly is on the news, isn't it? Oh my goodness, ad nauseum. I don't know about you. I listen to NPR on and off. Could you strike that from the... And you know, we have all the banks that have failed in Crete. We have all this going on, but it's all about DOMA and what's happening at the Supreme Court. So I think we're a little weary too, right? I mean, I feel weary sometimes. And sometimes when I'm about to get into a difficult dialogue with colleagues that are from the gay community, sometimes I just feel weary, and I pray a lot about that God would just continue to give strength and courage, and that's for everybody in this room, that we are willing to stand in the gap and have conversations, because it is very, very difficult to live in the tension. And some of you have heard me talk about this before. You've heard me say that before, that it's a difficult thing when you like somebody, when you respect them as a colleague, when you enjoy each other, I mean, have a lot of fun, when our kids know each other, you have all of that, but in there is that I'm from an evangelical community. I have a certain belief set that is fundamentally different than the gay community, and so we always live with that, living in the tension. And because we can do all those other things, enjoy each other and hang out and even do research together, or, you know, I do speaking, I have at least twice a year with a gay colleague that we just a regular talk that we've done at the California Psych Association. We do all of that, but we're always living there in the tension, and it's a very sophisticated thing to do. And we expect our undergrads to do this. We're expecting our undergrads to be able to how to figure that out. And the push for them, the movement for them, is to live and let live. Don't be judgmental. I don't want to be like those other Christians. And so, you know, we're in a difficult place, and I won't pretend that I'm modeling it well, but I think that it's something we're called to do. It's where we are. It's what God's put before us. So hopefully in sharing today, I can give you a little bit of background information into the etiology and that could help in some way. Just kind of have some of that information. When you leave today, you will have the answer. Oh, you didn't even have a hesitation. I thought I might get a few seconds of, really? No, you're too sophisticated. So no, you know that's not going to happen. But I would like to cover the theories posed in research on the origins of homosexuality. And what isn't on your handout is the resource list that's quite extensive, and that will be posted with the PowerPoint slides. But to put it on screen after screen of the PowerPoint and the handout just was not very smart. You're not new to the fact that there are many controversies that still surround homosexuality. We're wondering, is it innate? Is it learned? Can it be changed? You know, and if so, should we be doing that or no? And in fact, that's shaming to put people through that kind of thing of, you know, you need to change. Can we pray it away? Can God heal? Can God change? Would you even use that language? It's very complicated. And as I go through the various areas of research quickly, and again, it's a snapshot for you today, you know, all of those things are going to be floating. I think all those questions. I will be using same-sex attracted or attraction along with homosexual behavior homosexuality. Because actually the definition of homosexuality doesn't include behavior. It is what we think of as same-sex attraction, oddly enough, when you look through the various definitions. So, all right, here we go. I don't know where I am. There we go. Okay. All right. Historical references to current research. The literature focuses mostly on men. Very little research on women. And the whole thing came up? Yeah. You can go back in philosophy. Some of you have read. I mean, you know, Socrates was put to death in 399 BCE because he was corrupting the youth. And a lot of people believe it had to do with that he was involved in many homosexual relationships, even though in the culture there was no law against that at that time. But that was part of the thought, and Plato even included some of that information in some of his writings, alluded to it. So it's interesting. We go way back to historical references. We've been living with homosexuality for a very long time. It's not a new phenomenon. And current research, because and this is how research typically works. It typically focuses on men first. We've seen this in health research. It focuses on men, and then women. It's like, oh, what about that other half of the population? Hey, let's see how they're different. And then we did. So this is actually right on par with what is typical in research, is that it is mostly men. Mm-hmm. All right. Open discussion of sexuality ranges from taboo to just plain uncomfortable. This is not a topic we usually sign up for. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I signed up for it because I never know what my clients will say to me. It doesn't matter what person I'm seeing, anything is up for discussion. And before I was a psychologist, I worked in psych nursing and double-locked units and penal code units, and boy, you see a lot there and have a lot of conversations around sexuality. But it's an uncomfortable thing. It's taboo. This impacts the research because it means that people aren't as willing to jump in. I was joking with Roy on the way in. Roy, I don't know where you are out there. I can't see. That, you know, I am not particularly interested in being known as the gay researcher. Just as I'm sure our theologians, nobody wants to step and say, I'll be the gay theologian. Obama is now, I've already heard someone say he'll be known as the gay president because he was the first president to come out and say that he supports gay marriage. So it's a topic where, oh, I don't want to be associated with that. Well, you can imagine then that it's not something that we dive into with the research, okay? Makes sense. Okay. Politics often drives print media research. This is not surprising to you. Hollywood and Washington, D.C. are power meccas with lots of money, right? They have lots of money, and they hold sway pretty big in this topic area. They give lots and lots of money to research that we might say would be kind of going in with a researcher's bias. And so it's hard. We have pretty powerful people in play around this, which doesn't come up with lots of other topics when you think about it. Those two places, very powerful in terms. What is going on in the media is that you hear this on the news, you'll hear this with your newspaper or online, you're reading news, is you get that snapshot from a research study, right? Don't you hate that? Those of you out there that do research, you're thinking, how robust was the study? You know, does it really even matter what the results were? Would they hold up on re-examination? Well, we don't know that, and the public certainly doesn't know that. They're completely at the mercy of how the media puts these little bits out there. And we'll talk a little bit about that today with some particular areas. So terminology is also another thing. What does this mean? What are we really talking about? There are varying levels of understanding depending on the group you're in. And again, this, of course, would affect research looking at etiology, that if we're defining we're defining labels differently, then how can we say we're comparing the same thing? And so this gets to be a little bit of a difficulty. The other thing would be sexuality or sexual identity equals identity. It's a lot of information now, a lot of great writing on this, by the way, just great writing. It'll be in your reference list. That we have reduced our identity to sexual identity. And right now this is the push in our culture, is that's how I am defined. And that has not been the case in our past. It hasn't. So what does that mean when we reduce it down to, that's like me reducing it down, well, I have brown hair. That's who I am. I have brown hair. That's it. So it's ridiculous. Or our eye color or something, or a belief, maybe one belief that I have, that it's like that's who I am, that defines me completely, that we struggle with this. It doesn't set us up well to look at a phenomenon like homosexuality when we are so quick to truncate the definition and equate these two. The areas, by the way, something that was really interesting, a public health study by Boehmer in 2002 looked at 3,777 studies to see what variables were being studied. And what was fascinating about this is that still, even in 2002, AIDS and sexually transmitted diseases made up 55.8% of all those studies. Second was identity, sex behavior, or desire. But that was 13%. It's a huge drop. And then under that, and this was interesting to me, was etiology at 8.3%. So is it that we're not interested in etiology? I don't think so. I think that we're just having a really hard time defining what we're studying and really just going forward with it in a climate that's very difficult to go forward in. So I thought that was so interesting. Where we do research, who funds our research, all of those can be politically driven, and you know, where it's done is important. I don't know if you know this, but Denmark, Rick would know this probably, Denmark legalized homosexual marriage in 1989. There are a lot of studies that come out of Denmark, but it's a biased sample. So it's again, as we look through the studies, we're going to talk about when are we presupposing, when are we setting it up for a certain bias. All right. Okay. Let's see here. Is homosexuality deviant? It depends on who you ask. All right. Well, the American, oh, it showed up on mine, but not on yours. There you go. In 1973, homosexuality was removed from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Okay? That's the tool that we use as psychologists to make diagnoses and then develop treatment plans. So this was pretty big that it was taken off. it used to be listed with sexual perversion and as a sexual perversion, and listed with fetishes. And then in 1973, that went away. About 2 decades later, the World Health Organization also removed it from the International Classification of Diseases, which is kind of, if you picture a big set of books up here of all the diseases, medical diseases in the world, then the DSM is one of those books we would take out for mental illnesses. So it was taken out of all of their literature at that point. So is it deviant? Again, it depends on who you ask. All right. Flawed research can still yield helpful results. Remember that. So we don't throw it all out and say, oh my goodness, that's just worthless. And you'll see in a minute some studies that we ended up finding out some things that were fascinating, but the research in general were flawed. Or the methodologies, and we'll talk specifically, I won't jump ahead. But we don't want to just throw it all out just because we see that something is flawed. We're looking for truth. We're looking for, and research won't give us that ever, but we hope. We hope. We're looking for truth. We're looking for direction. We're looking for some kind of finite way of describing what's going on in any phenomena, and that in this particular topic area where people are living lives that other people think they should not be living at all. Some people even think they should be shut away somewhere. It is pretty powerful. What is the truth? It drives that, but again, interesting because the research, you don't have everybody jumping up to do the research, but the need for truth, the want to find out more is there. And so there are a lot of qualitative discussions or literature discussions, not necessarily research. Okay. So what are some of the problems? Sampling issues, non-representative. In one study, Blanchard and Bagert recruited subjects from Gay Pride Parade, LGBT organizations. So there can be some sampling issues. Oversampling of a convenient cluster would be another way that you could think of that. Researcher bias, definitely. When I'm researching, and I have to be careful about this, by the way, because my main area of research is looking at family issues and work balance issues. And I have to always be asking myself, how do I want to view these results? What is my bias going in? And qualitative research, that's actually built into the process. You actually talk about your biases, which, and again, I realize I'm preaching to the choir here, to colleagues, so you know this, but you build that in. But empirical, statistical kind of no first person ever studies, you're not accounting for that. It's the onus is on the researcher and their own ethics around that. And so this is a problem, is researcher bias. And then this last one, methodological issues. Oh, catch you up here. Large samples tend to yield significant results. Sample size plus effect size of the research, which you're looking for an effect size, equals significance. Well, the larger your sample size, the more likely your effect size, which then more likely you're to get significance. So it doesn't really tell us anything when we have large samples, and people, again, this is something that the lay public doesn't understand. Okay, oh man, they had so many people. It's like, well, how did they handle that data? Did they treat it well, is what we'd say, right? And account for the large sample. There are problems built into that. And that's where you look through, and hopefully we're training our students to do this well, look through and critique the study and talk about whether it was good. But boy, if we hear a lot of people, we're just really, really impressed with the statistics. So, all right, let's move forward to the research on etiology. Okay, when I looked at all the stuff that's out there, not all the stuff, that would have been amazing. When I looked through what I did on etiology, I ended up coming back to Jones and Quee, and this is a special issue from the Journal of Psychology and Christianity, and they wrote a chapter in that special issue, and it really is, and again, that's on your reference list. I have I just want to encourage you to read that. It's a great issue. Every article had to do with something relating to sexuality and particularly homosexuality. It's a great issue. But I'm taking what they did, and they're great researchers. They're able to look at studies with a critical eye, and so it was really fun actually to watch them look at a body of research and then say, well, this stands or this doesn't stand. And these are some problems. They were actually reworking or updating, not reworking, updating some research that was done earlier by who we just had on campus. His name just went right out of my head. Yarhouse, thank you. That he had done in 2000 and updated that. So my work is today, or my information for you today is really based on their stuff. And what I didn't do, again, for space on the PowerPoint is put every notation, but I want you to know that you probably could trace it back there. And then on the reference list, there will be other people, other studies. So, we'd like this to come down to the brain. If we could just figure that out, that one spot, then we could take care of things. And that's typically how we're driven in science, and a little bit ridiculous. Behavioral genetics. Let's talk a little bit about that. A researcher named Bailey conducted behavioral genetic studies. Behavioral. So this was in 1999. Wasn't doing any in-depth scans or any kind of invasive procedures, but looking at sexual orientation of twins and their siblings and how that came to be. And then extrapolating from that some kind of comment on genetics. And is it genetically are they genetically predisposed? He found, he said, a substantial degree of influence, okay, on the formation of homosexuality. Well, unfortunately, when his study was looked through, he had amazing bias. His sample was quite biased. He took his participants from gay pride parades and from gay events in general and organizations. Okay, so then his findings really were looked at pretty askance from the community. So where we end up after genetics is, and there's nothing else under that, oops, sorry, went back there too far, is no statistically significant indication of genetic influence on sexual orientation. There to this day is no link made. There's no genetic indicator that any researcher has found. So that's where we stand on the genetics. Let's talk about genetic scanning. This is interesting because this is looking particularly at chromosomes and trying to see if there's a region on the X chromosome that would account for homosexual behavior, feelings, behavior. And it's funny because one author, I don't remember if it was Jones or not, said that they engaged in some heroic statistical measures to try to get this to work. So in a review of the study, it didn't really hold up in terms of robustness. Now, what happened here was, oh gosh, I keep getting ahead of myself, I'm so sorry, is regions on the X chromosome I mentioned. One region, there was near significance. Two regions close to suggestive linkage. That was the strongest they could claim for that. What the media heard was this: genes linked to homosexuality on chromosomes 7, 8, and 10. That was the line that went to the media, okay? And this is precisely, that statement is precisely what they didn't find. It was exactly the opposite. So again, you know, we're talking about this research that gets put into the world in this is what it is kind of way by people who have a strong investment in that. And this maybe is a general call to arms here, that we need to be engaging in research. I don't believe in no bias. I don't think that exists. Don't think it has to exist, but in research that we all maybe could be a participant in, either in getting it started, in funding it, in collaborating with other people, because we need to be involved in this. So genetic scanning didn't really pan out, but that was another area. Human brain structure, this has been an interesting one. Looking at sex difference in neural number, not size. And it gets, those articles get pretty dense around women tend to, in some regions of the brain, not have as many neurons, but they fire differently. And I mean, this, and we have biology professors here who could probably discuss that a little more in depth with you. But any possible brain structure differences between heterosexual and homosexual individuals could be a result rather than the cause of sexual preference. Okay, so the research on this, and the researchers themselves have said that we don't know if what we're seeing is a result of the behavior or something that would be causal to the behavior. So human brain structure, currently there is nothing that we can point to and say, yeah, this is what a homosexual brain looks like. This is what it's like. Okay? By the way, we can't do that with anything else either. We have some studies on dementia that get close. We have, Tanya, you could talk about, we have studies on learning disabilities and neuropsychological problems that we can say this brain looks different, obviously pre-post injury, but not in this area. So I feel like I'm just disappointing you now. But the authors did a really good job in pointing this out themselves, that they did not find any kind of direct link. Okay, let's see. This was interesting. I don't know if you heard of this research. Gay sheep and gay flies. So there's a little thing for you there. There's a human in that. So here you've got this in this cartoon. I thought it was apt because you've got the fruit fly that's concerned about the human in the soup. And we're looking at fruit flies to explain our behavior. Okay, and it's just, and that's part of the criticism for this kind of research. And I'll get specific with you here. Summary by Roselli and his people said 8 to 10% of rams prefer same-sex partners. Okay? They have same-sex preferences. But on further study, what they found was that it's driven by smell. Okay? Where, when you're talking about human beings, we have all of this that comes into play. All of this here, right? That is part of what makes us sexual, what makes us interested in somebody else. All of that comes into play. There's no way that we can figure out from a ram what his fantasy is about another ram, or do you like me too, and that kind of thing is not going to happen. So the research starts to break down when you get at exactly what's going on for the ram, which they were able to do, that it's based on smell. Now we know pheromones, we know that actually could be part of what goes on, or is part of what goes on for human beings, but there's so much more to it. But this part, it's interesting. One author said that the same-sex, same-sex preference driven by smell has not made it into the literature. That whenever this the gay sheep study is cited, you don't see that. So again, it's just kind of that bias that exists. The fruit fly gets even more interesting. If you are in the biological sciences, you're going to love this, because they created this gene. And what they did was, it's a gene fragment, and what they did was they ended up splicing it into fruit flies, gendered fruit flies. And what happened is that females splicing in male results in female splicing, in male results in loss of male courtship behavior. There, sorry. So when the female got that particular piece spliced in, they were no longer interested in that. Females in which the fru is what it's called, is spliced in male behavior, or in males, what happens is that they don't want to court any longer. So there was a direct biological implication there, that we can change this, we can splice this, we can insert it in, and we will have differences of behavior. The problem and the criticism with this research is that it gets at what the other did, and that is that that doesn't have a direct link to us. And so, it gets to something that's quite interesting, I think, but not close enough for it to make a big difference for us. Okay. So it's at that last part there, it said it was impossible to tease out social factors. All right, fraternal birth order. This is really interesting stuff. Studies have looked at what happens in male birth order, fraternal birth order, and what they found is male homosexuals born later in sibships than male heterosexuals. They're born later, okay? So you are going to have them maybe their fourth, fifth child, okay? They're not going to be first, second child. Male homosexuals tend to have more older brothers. This has been a robust result that has crossed studies. Interesting, that they will have older brothers. Now there's some implications of that we'll talk about. One of the theories is that mothers progressively produce, in response to each succeeding male fetus, antibodies to a substance called the HY antigen, okay? And then what happens from there is that the testosterone, the hormones that the males are supposed to have to move them toward females, okay, biologically, is not there. And so there's a breakdown in that. Well, there's no direct evidence. As researchers looked at this, they have found no direct evidence that this in fact is the case. So it's a theory, but it hasn't been borne out. And in anything that I've seen, and as I've looked through and done some seeking out, and Jones and Quee did not find this anywhere. There is something to it, though, okay? There is something to it, some link between sexual orientation and fraternal, but not sororal, which would be sisters, birth order, okay? But the pathway is not known. But this is when I said before that you can have flawed research and have some interesting results. This is something that has been a robust finding. So what is that about? Well, the problem here is that we find this same thing, that you might have a lot of male children, and maybe the third, fourth is gay. You might have they're a sex offender. There might be another sexual deviancy, which I'm talking statistically now, heterosexual versus homosexual. It would be deviant from the norm. That's interesting, that you also find this in other populations. What does that mean? Okay. Well, obviously we need more research to flesh this out, but this is the uncomfortable place that this theory brings us. Research is needed to flesh it out because a current, albeit not popular, theory is one of sexual abuse history. And we know from that literature that younger siblings, particularly boys, of many older boy siblings, that they will have a higher incidence of abuse. And I state that very, very carefully, okay? That's shown in some studies. That's an incidence number. I can't tell you the robustness of that across the board, but it is something that we've seen in the abuse literature. So then you say, well, is that why you have this? There are other thoughts about this, though, like that firstborn children, and certainly firstborn males in many cultures, feel a responsibility to live out that maleness in their culture, okay? And so when you get down to the third, fourth male the brother, right, they don't have the same kind of pressure. So that's the brother who would feel more comfortable coming out. You've got that handled on the top end of the chain here. And so that's a social theory that is out there as well, floating. But we do know that this is out there, that this is happening. We see this in the birth order, the fraternal birth order. It was very interesting. All right. Familial structure. Let's take a look at that. And I have this just flying up here now because I know we want to get through it all. this was interesting. There was substantial, this was a study that looked at adolescents, substantial indirect evidence in support of socialization model at the individual level. They found that male-female twins, the male had twice the occurrence of same-sex attraction as male-male twins. Okay? Sexual attraction is an outgrowth of gender socialization, and that no arrangement presents as much a challenge to parents to gender socialization than for a boy to be born simultaneously with a co-twin girl. This is what they made of it, is that it's a socialization process, that it's very difficult to socialize a male into being male when you're doing that exactly the same time with a female. So another result that sits out there as pretty robust, but we don't know what it means yet. We really don't know what it means. Could it be hormonal transfer? I think this is an excellent question. I mean, don't you wonder about that with female-male twin in the uterus same time? Is it, well, the effect disappeared when the boy with the twin sister was born into a family with an older brother. Doesn't hold up anymore. So it's interesting. Okay. Okay. All right. This, I don't know how many of you have seen this book before, Female Chauvinist Pigs, but it's a hard read in terms of what it talks about. But basically, has anybody read it? Anybody read that book? No? It's about the current culture of women buying into the subjugation of women. So women who will wear like Playboy symbol necklaces, okay? They put it on their cars, right? We see that. But it's also gone into, this book goes into the gay community and what it goes on in the gay community in terms of women who are taking on very male-dominant type of behavior to the point sometimes of domestic violence and abuse. Okay, and expect their female partner to be subservient and really, really reinforce very stereotypical roles. So it's fascinating to see this. Well, it fits with this gender inversion theory. Same-sex attraction equals opposite-sex trait characteristic. So this theory talks about, is there just their traits that people are born with that really more determine their femaleness or maleness? Okay, and how that's acted out. Is that more the case? So persons who are erotically attracted to members of their own sex must be, by definition, manifesting a trait characteristic of persons of the other sex. And so this is when we talk about effeminate males, or in the vernacular, butch females, that's what this research is getting at, is looking at, is there something that's a trait that's in there somewhere that propels them to this behavior. Okay, again, we don't have anything that is definitive. Gender is more than biological processes and traits. It's dynamic. It's based on where we grow up. It's based on the environment we're in. We know there are lots of factors. So, again, we want to land somewhere and we can't quite do that. Okay. All right. Attachment theory, familial factors. Okay? We know that there's a lot of research looking at familial factors. Attachment is real big in the last decade, probably more than that, in psych theory. And we've been looking a lot at this. Measures have been developed that are really exciting in terms of getting at what somebody's attachment was when they were children. And we can predict how they will attach to adults later based on that. Okay, it's pretty exciting. There's neurobiology that goes along with this, that there's a certain way that our brains function depending on what kind of attachment we have, and it really is exciting stuff. So how does it show up here? Well, you can see the majority of studies investigating the link were conducted a long time ago. So we don't have anything that's current on this. And again, what I just said, while in other areas, like in the field of psychology, this is off the chart moving forward of what does this mean around attachment. So the familial aspects I'm expecting to come back into play soon as that research moves forward. But right now we don't have anything. So, yeah, we'll see. By the way, Bowlby is a name you should associate with attachment. He was the one that really came up with what that meant, and then there are lots of people after to give us more detail, and then, as I said, measures have been developed. We're doing a lot of research at Rosemead, actually, using the adult attachment inventory and taking a look at that. So familial, again, we don't have a lot to point to. I'm also putting on Purrington. This was a literature review that one of our students did that will be on your reference list. So, findings. We always want to be cautious whenever we're looking at findings of a study. Again, was it well done? What kind of biases were in place? Were there sampling errors? Effect size errors in terms of large samples. So attachments and familial factors play a part in homosexual identity development. There's one place that this has landed, okay? One place. And that is, and this is why I have that big hand up there to be cautious, because the last thing I'd want to do is have you walk out of here as that this is a definitive statement. But it has been reoccurring in the literature. Distant rejecting dads and over-involved controlling moms. Now, what's ironic is that this was some of the very first literature in the 1800s looking at this. And then it was poo-pooed hey, as being incredibly pejorative. And here we are again, that we are actually finding this in literature. I do not believe we can say that somebody is gay because they have a distant rejecting father. Hey, I want this on tape, Jeremy. Or an over-involved controlling mother. It is not that simplistic, and we want to be careful, but it is something that the results have been finding. Cross studies, results are out there, cross studies. Here are a few names that I put down, but again, you'll have some on your reference list that speak to this. So, interesting. Okay. The references I used today, as I said, many of these were based on Jones and Quee, and that whole journal is really worth it. I think if you're interested at all in these topics, you're going to find that what I just very briefly talked about today is covered there, and then points you in other directions as well. And then Susan's dissertation, but then I will also put the resource list out there. All the other citations, references will be posted. Not necessarily, I mean, we could exhaust a reference section as well. So I didn't give you everything that I'd come across, but enough of it. So where we are at this point is that we don't know why. Right? You had some things that were a little more definitive today, right? Some things, but we really are still in the infancy of this research. And again, I would say that because of the bias and because just the lack of somebody knowing what they're doing when they're actually researching and using their statistics. So, you know, we need people to come in who are very knowledgeable to review and say, hey, yeah, this is a robust study. It actually means something. And that doesn't happen a lot. You know? In our ethics code for psychologists, there's a section on there that talks about research and publication. We have to make our data available to anybody who has a legitimate reason to ask for that. So if a colleague said, you know, Tammy, I read that article that you wrote based on that the research you conducted, and I'm questioning those results. I would like to review that data. Okay? I think about that when I'm conducting research, is that if a colleague walked in and ran the same test that I am, would there be a similar finding, outcome? So, I find this stuff very interesting, but it's not the meat, I don't think, of the relationship. These are things I've actually talked to my gay colleagues about, and we've had some interesting conversations. But and sometimes they'll say, you know, that's not my story. That doesn't define me. I had a very loving, close relationship with my father. It wasn't me. And so we never want to make that leap into causation. But that's where we find ourselves. The only way this gets played out is out of academia is in relationship. And how are we interacting with people? How are we discussing research? Wouldn't it be great to partner with the gay community in research? I mean, it's almost, wow, it blows me away just to think about it. Wouldn't it be great to do that? Okay. That entering into relationship is really where we want to go. And again, as Rick started off today, I'm just so pleased to hear him talk about people and recognizing that this research is about people. The participants are people, and then how we are interacting with them. And I know Clark and Danelle talked about family members, and you had Tim talking about how do you engage in difficult dialogue. So this is more the dry piece, but hopefully a little bit of information for you to take with you. So yeah, thank you.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.